I would say the three strategic mistakes that America made. The first one was in 1990. What's significant about 1990 was the end of the Cold War. And the West was so happy. I was in Europe and America then, and it was in a big triumphalist mood because it said, hey, we won the Cold War without firing a shot. Amazing. We are so powerful. We are so great. And then Francis Fukuyama wrote the famous essay called The End of History to capture that triumphalist mood. That essay caused a lot of brain damage to the West and to America because it made them fall asleep at precisely the moment when China and India were waking up around 1990. And that was a first strategic mistake. The second strategic mistake was in 2001. And what happened in 2001? If you ask the Americans, they would say 9/11 happened in 2001. This was the attack by Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda on the World Trade Center towers, and they demolished the World Trade Center towers in 2001. And so as a result of that, America went ahead and got involved in wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But it forgot the far more important event in 2001 was China's admission into WTO, because according to Western economic theory, when China suddenly injects 800 million new workers into the global economic system, clearly there's going to be creative destruction. Clearly jobs will be lost in America, and an American economist, David Otto, has documented how American jobs were lost after China joined the World Trade Organization, because this is what competition is all about. And unfortunately, the elites in America didn't pay attention to how their working classes were suffering, and that's as a result of the unhappiness of the working classes, Donald Trump was elected President of America in 2016. That was the second strategic mistake. The third strategic mistake was in 2014, because what happened in 2014? And the best way to describe this is to compare the relative shares of United States of America and China of the global economic power. And in 1980, United States share was 25%, and China's share was 2.2%, less in purchasing power parity terms. China's share was less than 10% that of America's. Yet by 2014, America's share had gone down to 16-something%, and China's had rose to become over 16%, bigger than America's. Now that's an earth-shaking event. That should have been a wake-up call for America to say, hey, now we have to adjust to a world in which we are no longer number one. But in America, it's impossible for any American leader, whether a political leader or an intellectual leader, to talk about America becoming number two. So America, that at one stage used to have very good strategic thinkers like Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, George Kennan, suddenly no longer has strategic thinkers to guide America into a new world where America becomes number two. So these three big strategic mistakes, I think, explain why the American population today is a very troubled population and feels very insecure about the world. I wouldn't say that China has been making strategic mistakes, but I think it has been making some tactical mistakes. I think there was a point after the great global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, when some Chinese policymakers saw how badly the American and European economies performed in that crisis. And China, as you know, sailed through the crisis and continued to grow significantly. I think there were some Chinese policymakers also became overconfident and became a bit too pushy in their relationships with some of their neighbors. And as a consequence of that, some of the neighbors of China were a bit alarmed by China's behavior. But the good thing about China is that Chinese policymakers learned very fast. and change course. And you now notice that China's relations with its neighbors have improved again after going through a slight rough patch after the global financial crisis. So it's very important for China also not to become complacent, because it is going to be a very challenging world. So when China becomes number one, the concern about China will rise among its neighbors. This is perfectly natural. If you live in a small global village and one house in the village becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, the other occupants of the global village begin to worry, wow, this house is so big. Is it going to become much, much bigger? So China must learn to be much more sensitive to its neighbors.